Welcome back to the Afterword, a conversation about the future of words. We are so glad to have Jenni Mauran here with us to continue our conversation about tidiness. What does that mean? What's the story of living tidily? We want to talk about keeping our homes and our lives tidy. Okay, we talked about kind of why in the last episode. Why should we be tidy? Why do we have a hard time being tidy? What does it mean to declutter our lives? Now let's talk about how. Let's get more practical. I know for me, when I look at an untidy room or desk or even a paper that I'm handwriting something on, I just get overwhelmed. And it seems to me like I'll claim I'm tidying up, but what I'm really doing is just reorganizing my clutter. How do I stop that and actually start tidying up?
Oh, that is a magic question. There are definitely some ways to get motivated and help getting started, but you are not alone. I think that is a very, very common problem, and that, a thing that people struggle with, not problem. But and if you're not wired like that, if you're not wired to see how to do that, it's very difficult. Especially for my ADHD friends have told me this is a real struggle. Like, I cannot focus more than a minute. There's no way I can make myself do this. I can really get motivated. I can focus on this. And so there are definitely some tactics. But if you're going, there are kind of two ways. If you're going the KonMari method, which I've always really liked how she tidies by category instead of room. For a lot of people, you have multiple items from the same category, maybe in different places in your home. So what she starts out with is clothes, because there's not a lot of emotional attachment with your clothes, and it's typically the easiest place to start. So if you're going to if you really want to do a big overhaul of your home and really see those benefits, that's where I would start, is with the KonMari method. It's clothes, books, papers, kimono, which is miscellaneous items, and then sentimental last. And so basically it kind of gives you this progression to really, we call it strengthening your decluttering muscle. So by the time you get to the really hard stuff, you've practiced and you've gotten good at it, and that part's a little bit easier. That sentimental item part is a little bit easier. If you're not there yet, particularly with people who that have a hard time focusing, number one, I would have somebody with you. I think having a partner, and that's what my clients will tell me, this was so much better just having you with me. Like, they just need encouragement. They need someone to tell them, give them permission to let go. Hey, it's okay. It's okay if you let that go. You're not using it. No one's going to judge you. Let it go. You've got this person kind of in your ear. The second thing is starting 5-minute increments. So one day, say at your desk, Colin, you go, okay, I'm going to go through my pens and pencils. So you look in your drawer and say you have 30 of them, 40 of them. You've accumulated them. Everywhere you go, someone gives you a pen with their logo on it. You pick out your 5 favorite pens, you put them in your drawer, and you declutter the rest, because you can't use that many pens at one time, right? So you have to think logically. You start thinking logically, not emotionally. And when you feel overwhelmed, you take a baby step. So that's what I tell people. And then maybe the next day, 5 minutes, and you stop. You make yourself stop. Next day, 5 minutes, you get a stack of papers, and you look through those papers, and you shred what you don't need, recycle what you don't need, keep what you do, and put it away in the file. Done. Stop after 5 minutes. And it feels so much more manageable, and you feel that little bit of success because you actually did accomplish something. And then that snowballs and it becomes easier. And then some days you might keep going. You're like, hey, I'm feeling good about this. I'm going to go through my whole file cabinet or my bookshelf, whatever it is. But I think it's just like anything else. If we can get that little bit of reward, like, oh, we accomplished something, we're making progress, then it makes moving forward easier. So hopefully that helps. So go declutter on your pen, Colin.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I like the category versus room, because I think if you just go and think about a room, sometimes that can be really overwhelming. Because apparently the average home has 300,000 items. That's ridiculous. And so thinking about that from a category standpoint rather than a room standpoint might be helpful. But let's say I am still not thinking logically. I'm very emotional about this and I am stuck. I'm just not moving forward. And I'm like, Jenni, I cannot do this. I am frustrated and I need you to come to my house. What are we going to do all day besides me sitting in a pile and crying?
Okay. We don't want you sitting in a pile and crying. So, and that's usually the conversation I have. I don't know how to, I get a lot of times I don't know how to start. Kind of what Alan mentioned before. So if we were doing the KonMari method, if you want to do the whole KonMari process, we would start with your clothes and we would literally empty anywhere in your house that are clothes. If you have clothes in the attic even, we get everything out. We usually dump it on the bed or somewhere in the home. And we do go through each item, just like she does if you've seen her television show or read her books, each item to see if it sparks joy. Now, I would argue there are some things maybe that don't always spark joy, but you really need. You know, if you have a pair of work boots that aren't your favorite, but you need your work boots, we're not going to, toss those because they don't spark joy. But we go through every item and then we kind of cultivate that category of your life first. And a lot of times it's not in one, it's over multiple visits. Depends on how many clothes someone has and how some people can get kind of tired from it. Like it's a lot of decision making. It can be very exhausting. And it sounds silly to say I'm exhausted from making decisions in my closet, but you can kind of watch people. They just hit a wall and they can't make any more decisions. Like I cannot, and so I can kind of see when it's time to stop and start again. So that's kind of how we would do it. I would basically be holding your hand going, okay, Amy, do you really love this top? Do you wear it? Does it fit you well? Does it bring you joy? And you might go, it's not my favorite, but my sister gave it to me. And I'm going to be there with you telling you, well, that's okay. I think your sister would understand if you parted with this, if you're not wearing it and it's taking it. And so I'm just there to kind of be your coach and your encourager so that you don't get down. And when you get down, I'll pull you back up and we're doing it. We're in it together. I'm in there with you the entire time. And so it becomes more of a team effort. And I do think it is important to have someone who can kind of read you. Because if you're getting exhausted from it, if you're getting stressed out, you're not going to want to move forward. You don't want to wear someone out. And so it might take a few hour sessions. It might take a few 3-hour sessions. It just depends on the person. But that's basically how we would start. I do have some clients who would like to do a space. They don't want to do the whole KonMari method. So we'll do an office or a kid's room or whatever. And we do it. We basically do it the exact same way.
Okay. So you take that space and categorize that space.
Mm-hmm. And if we're doing KonMari, we do the categories. And if I'm doing a space, I'll go into that space. And a lot of times I will say, if we're in, say, an office space, hey, do you have more papers in your home? Let's go ahead and do this while we're in here. It doesn't always work, but I try to so that they don't have to go do it multiple times.
Sure.
But yeah, it's a lot of just working together, encouraging, and kind of leading someone through the process so they don't feel alone, they don't feel discouraged, and they don't get overly stressed. And then we take it to the car together. Sometimes we drive it to the donation place together, or I take it for them. And I've actually made a lot of friendships. It's just really, and you hear stories. People start telling you about, my mother made this for me. And she tells you the story about why her mother made the quilt. And you get to hear some really neat, you get to know people really well, and you get to see why they do love the things that they do really love.
Sure. Sure.
So I enjoy that. I definitely enjoy
there's a
that.
personal connection to that, but getting exhausted about making decisions. I get exhausted thinking about packing to go on a trip and, pre-pandemic, more travel, and now getting back into travel. It's just like that suitcase sits there and looks at me like, you have to put things in me, So I can imagine having to go through a category and make those decisions on your own without having somebody to help guide you would be a difficult and exhausting experience. So that makes sense.
And I think when you see that first giant pile, it's very overwhelming. Like you can just see panic on particularly women's faces. Yeah. And I think that's why it's good to have somebody with you going, okay, let's do one at a time. We're going to, again, that baby step. We don't have to tackle this whole pile right now.
That's right. We don't have to eat the whole elephant.
That's right.
I know we've kind of touched on this a couple times, but what about sentimental items? As I've been going through my house, I sit down and look at something and think, well, that belonged to someone in my family, or that was something that we got on this trip when I was 8 years old and we went to, San Antonio or wherever. Should I keep that as a memory? Now, if I ask my 22-year-old son, he will just take it from me, put it in a pile, and drive it off to the dump because he doesn't care. But I would keep all of it. I would keep every paper because, well, I get it out and look at it once every 3 or 4 years, and it's fine. What do I need to do to keep the things that really do have sentimental value and be able to let everything else go?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think everyone struggles with this. It is definitely the hardest part, hands down. And that's why Marie Kondo has it at the end. Even when I'm not doing the Kondo process with someone, if we're going through, say, a room and there are sentimental items in there, we put them to the side. I tell people up front, let's don't do this right now. But I think that one of the things you can do is, it's hard to think logically and not emotionally with those types of items. So like a lot of moms have trouble with kids' clothes. Oh, that's my son's 18-month romper. That's hard. Something that's been handmade, something that has been passed down or inherited from someone who's passed away. That's hard stuff. That there are a lot of memories, a lot of love tied to those things. So what I typically do is, and you don't ever want to push anyone to let go of something like that is precious to them. I think the key is to take some of the emotion out of it and try to think logically. And so if you have 3 sets of your grandmother's dishes, my advice in that situation would be, okay, which one is your favorite? Why don't we keep one? Keep the one that you love the most. Or if it's one set, what parts of these? Keep a platter in a saucer. What do you love the most? Let's see if we can keep kind of a sample size of this, not all of it. So like with kids' drawings, that's really hard. Kids' art. I don't know. I'm sure you guys have struggled with this too. We have a lot of it. So same thing. We try to keep the things that the kids love the most and that we love the most. We don't keep every piece of paper that comes in the house because we literally cannot store that. And so that's what it's still that kind of hand-holding thing of talking people through it. And there's no black and white answer to that question, but talking people through it. Okay, how many dresses did your mother make? Well, she made 10. What if we keep 3? And then what can we do with these others? Are there family members? Another thing that's very important, I think, right now with these last couple of generations is leaving things for the next generation. Do my kids want this? Okay, so this might be special to me. And I would recommend having that conversation, especially if you have older children, like the 22-year-old. That's a conversation. Now, it might not be what you want to hear. Hey, my grandmother made this quilt. Dad, he throws it in the pile. I think those are good conversations. They call it, it's called Swedish death cleaning. That's what it's called. That sounds very morbid, but it's basically kind of going through and decluttering your home so as to not burden your children, grandchildren, whomever will be dealing with your estate when you are no longer here. And so if you do keep a lot of stuff, you have to remember that someone will be having to go through it. And that's a difficult process. And so that's kind of something that in the last few years has been, I personally know a lot of people who have really struggled through that process of losing parents and grandparents and just having, so many items to go through. So that's another consideration. But I fully, I'm all about having that conversation with your children as part of that process as well. But yeah, it's hard. Again, there's no perfect answer, but I think having the support, talking it through, and being open-minded enough to go, hey, I might not be able to keep all of this, 100% of this. Maybe I should keep 25% of it. And then put it out in your house. If you love your grandmother's platter and that's the part you kept from your china set, put it out. Look at it every day and feel that joy and remember your grandmother instead of knowing that it's in a box in the attic. And that's just my personal, that's what I have kind of worked into my lifestyle. And it's wonderful. I have little things from all of my family in my home, and I have just a few things, but they're my favorite things and they're out where I can see them. And so I think that's, if you can get people to kind of see the other side of that, and then the memories aren't going away. The memories are not going away. Photos are really hard for people. Photographs are really hard. And so a lot of times we'll take those out of frames and put them like in an accordion file, find some way to kind of at least reduce the footprint for storing them. But there are a lot of little things like that we do that reduce the space that things take up, but still allow people to keep the things that they want to keep, just maybe in a different way they haven't thought of. So, and I enjoy doing that. That's a very satisfying part, is helping people find those solutions for kind of the emotional ties to those items.
Yeah, that's a great word. I remember, and I like that you brought up having that conversation with your children. And I think even with young children can understand that. Years ago, a friend of mine told me about the underbed sweater tote plastic containers.
Right.
And so each of my girls has one of those, and whatever artwork or school stuff that they wanted to keep for that year went in that, but to sustain them all through high school. So if it didn't fit in the box, it had to go. So, now they all have their little plastic containers of school things, but it's in one plastic container. So
see, that's funny that you said that, the word container, because that is the word I use with a lot of people to visualize everything as inventory in containers. So you literally had a container under your bed, and when that container got too full, it had to be decluttered. Your rule was, okay, whatever fits in here, no more. Okay. If you think of your home, of your room, of your kitchen cabinets, everything is a container. And your rule is everything has to fit in these containers. And when it starts to come out, if it starts to overflow, it's time to declutter. I have too much, right? That's a good way to kind of keep yourself in check. And if you think of everything in your house as your inventory, you have to manage it. You have to clean it, store it, know where it is, and think about it. Pay for it in some cases, repay for it if you've got it in storage. So if you think about it in those terms, inventory and containers, it helps you put boundaries on your stuff. And so if you're not that great at regulating it on your own, those containers will, right? And so that does help a lot of people. But it was just funny when you said that with container, that's exactly that applies to really everything. It applies to your schedule. It applies to your social life. It applies to absolutely everything. I think decluttering, it goes way past your stuff. And so, I'm so glad that you said that, because I think that's really, really important.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. So at least I've got one area of my house that's got some containers that are working, but unfortunately, we'll have to keep working on those containers. All right. So according to Marie Kondo, she says your real life begins after putting your house in order. So what effect does tidying a house beyond your home, just like you were mentioning, have on our community and our world?
Yeah, I would argue a tremendous amount. And I think what happens with a lot of people, I know it did with myself and my family, when you start to see the benefits of decluttering your home and tidying your home, you want more and more and more. And so that all of a sudden you start analyzing maybe your daily schedule. Hey, do I need to be doing this? What would I rather be doing instead of this? Maybe I want to read. Maybe I want to hang out with my kids. Maybe there's whatever it is. So you start being really intentional, not just about your stuff, but about your schedule. And then you're really intentional about where your money goes, because you're not buying all this stuff. And I find myself, I could not go to Target. You guys feel me? Could not go to Target and not get something off that little dollar display, right? Every single time. And I would go in there for one thing, come out with 10, right? I don't do that anymore. I can walk by things, fall decor, chocolate, whatever it is, and not buy it, because I'm on the other side now, and I don't want to bring it in my house. I don't want to have to declutter it a month from now. And I'll still buy stuff and get, it's not like I don't ever go buy new things, but I'm very intentional. Like if I need, even with my clothes, if I need a pair of jeans, I'm going to wait and really get a pair of jeans that I like. I'm not going to go just buy the cheap jeans and buy 5 pairs, the cheapest I can find. And so it just changes how you think. It changes how you think about everything in your life. And then if you free up your time, you might be able to do some more things in the community, give money in the community to charities or passions that you have that you didn't have time for before. When you declutter, you'll start finding these little increments of time that it might be 5 or 15 minutes that you used to spend an hour dusting, and now you spend 15 minutes dusting. Or you've cultivated your kitchen, so instead of having 3 sets of dishes, you have just enough dishes for your family and you can do the dishes in 10 minutes. Or if someone's coming over, you can tidy your house in 10 minutes. You don't panic because you can go put everything back in a few minutes because you don't have clutter everywhere. And so it takes that stress away. It brings you peace. It feels manageable. And then I think that just overflows into every aspect of your life. And so you can definitely affect your relationships in your home, the community, your work, all of those things when you start to kind of declutter your life. And that's a really broad statement. But I haven't found many aspects of life that it doesn't apply to. I really haven't.
Yeah. The only thing I'm going to argue with is you said you can walk past the chocolate and not bring it in your house. And I'm just thinking that
was a lie.
Wrong about that.
No, I just lied on the podcast.
Okay. All right. Just checking. I'm thinking if that means declutter is I'm not allowed to bring any chocolate in my house, I'm going to have to be a sloppy mess.
No, that's my week.
All right. Well, we have one last question for you, and that is, what's a metaphor to help us understand living tidily?
That sounds like a really difficult question, but it's actually very easy. I would say tidying / decluttering is freedom in every way. Freedom from your stuff, freedom in your schedule, the things we just talked about. You just feel freer and freer and less weighed down, and you want more and more of it. And I know that's a very simple answer, but I can tell you it's the truth. And I've seen it really change people's, particularly busy moms or moms with young children, moms that work and have kids at home. That's a group of people that feels, I'm not saying everyone doesn't feel overwhelmed. And that might be the one the group I relate to the most because I've been there. I've worked full time. I've worked part time. I've stayed at home. I've worked from home. And that overwhelming feeling of like, I cannot be 100% all these things. Something's got to give. And to help those people have less kids' clothes, have less laundry, have less to clean, and get some time for themselves and some peace and feel like they're managing their life more efficiently. To me, that's the most rewarding part, to see that stress come off of a mom. So I'll help anyone, but that to me, that's kind of that's the person that I think I understand the most. But
so if that person wants to get in touch with you and wants to know more about how you can help them, how do they reach out?
Sure. Just my email, my phone number. It's Jenni Mauran at Gmail, and it's JenniMauran at Gmail. Okay. And then my number is 770-870-4505.
All right. Well, we can add that into the show notes. So for folks who say, this is exactly what I've been needing, somebody to stand with me and help me organize my decluttering process and kind of help me process as I get rid of stuff that means something to me, but I know I don't need it anymore, right? They can get in touch with you. That's great.
I would love it.
Next week, Amy, we're going to be talking about human-to-human connections.
Oh, such a powerful conversation that we're going to be having next week. But Jenni, thank you so much for your time tonight. This has been wonderful. And to all of our listeners, please leave us a review, rate us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Go to theafterwordpodcast.com, leave us a review there, or become a subscriber. We do have a little chat. If you want to ask us a question or you've got something you want to connect with with one of our guests, it does help us keep the conversations going. And as always, please remember you are welcome at our table.